Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday Night Dharma Gathering. And we're going to start our talk in a minute as soon as we get everybody hooked up, wired up. So Seth has posted on my Facebook page, facebook.com/DavidNickturn, the link for both watching and a separate link for seeing the comments. So hopefully you have been able to follow that. Maybe some of you could let me know you're out there. And you can also see the comments by going to facebook.com/DavidNickturn, and you'll see a scroll of comments there. Here are comments. Oops, I spelled it wrong. Any questions here? So I just want to make sure some of you are on with us. And I'm seeing you. I don't see anybody yet posting up, so I'm not sure if this is, okay, I see that's where they should be coming. So maybe a few of you could write in and let me know you're out there. We're going through a slightly different routing. And we'll get started in a few minutes, just as soon as I see that some of you are there. Okay, it's all working. Thank you, Seth. I see that it's all working. So Joe is here. I can see and hear you loud and clear, which is good. Monica's here in very close proximity. Greetings from New York. Rebecca is there. Hello. Joe from YO is out of the wind and into the Sangha. Very good. Glad to hear that. Let's see who else has shown up. Okay, Stephanie Saba, blessings from the cold and windy Midwest. It's about to be the cold and windy Northeast too. El Meta's here. It's Metamorphos, new account. Okay, maybe a few more of you can just sign and let me know that we're sort of making good contact so far and everything's working. Okay, then we'll get underway with the topic. So again, if you're just tuning in and you want to participate, there's a link posted on my Facebook page where you can see all the comments scrolling. Ari is there. Okay. I'm going to assume that most people are here and able to participate and see, and we can get underway. So, again, good evening. Welcome to Tuesday Night Dharma Gathering. This will be the last such talk in 2014, because as I mentioned on my Facebook page before, I'm going to be going to Maui to participate in a workshop with Krishna Das, Ram Das, and Jack Cornfield as musician. And then there's just a couple of weeks in the holiday season there, which I'm going to just be laying low, doing some practice. So hopefully everybody's in tune, can hear and see. The topic tonight is forgiveness, and as it relates to karma. So even maybe more so than usual, this is a topic which I have been pondering, you could say, for the last 6 or 7 days. Kind of came to a head in a discussion Sunday night with the Muldaur clan out in East Hampton. Had dinner with Maria and Muldaur, who most of you know that I used to work with musically. Wonderful singer and great person, one of the original Americana exigentes, excellence and knowledge of the traditional American music. Great proponent of that. singer of Midnight at the Oasis. God bless her for that. And generally wise woman. And then her daughter Jenny, who is a very close friend, and Dawn, which is Maria's sister, and several other people. Monica was there, and Ramesh and Kate, and we, and Michael Slifka, and we had a sort of circle gathering for dinner, lovely dinner, and then, as often happens with that kind of crew, we had a little satsang afterwards, and the topic on my mind is this issue of forgiveness, and Maria is a very, very strong Christian practitioner. I'm going to use the same word as we would use for a Buddhist person, because she actually practices that tradition deeply. And I was kidding her. I said, you're actually kind of now a minister disguised as a blues singer. And I think she really also feels herself that way these days. And the topic of forgiveness, which I feel is something they talk about quite a bit in the Christian tradition, and there's a lot of things that relate to it in Buddhism, but it's sort of probably maybe not one of the 3 or 4 main headlines as far as I studied. Of course, compassion is huge, and the idea of driving all blames into oneself, which is immediately has the idea of forgiveness, and the idea of purification, or cleaning up one's own business, and one's own neurosis and obstacles, and not blaming them on others, which is also really pre-forgiveness, is like a pre-clause, but the thing that I'm wrapping my mind around and want to kind of throw up for all of us to talk about tonight, and I'm going to say a few words to get us started, but then I really think that the idea tonight is to get a little heated conversation going, like we had the other night, is the relationship between forgiveness and processing karma. Like, is when you forgive somebody, does that mean you bypass the actual sharpness and wakefulness of processing whatever conflict, whatever karmas may be embedded there, and really coming to a higher stage of resolution? In other words, you give up too quickly when you forgive something. Have you not really chewed your way through it? Have you not processed it completely? So I want to look at that from a number of different angles, and really, this is definitely one where your guess is going to be, I'm going to say, as good as mine, maybe better than mine, depending on your life experience. It came about as a result of some family conversations, and conversations that other people have had about their families, and maybe resentments that we've gathered over time for certain people who maybe we felt wronged us, or treated us badly when we were kids, or grown-ups, or people in business, or politics, different tribes, warfare. Obviously, I'm going to at some point go to the black belt macro topic of Hitler. I think it applies. You have to be able to go all the way out with this kind of thing, or otherwise it just starts to be a kind of stopgap measure for dealing with reality. You have to, if somebody's really going to take this on as a practice, the practice of forgiveness, they'd have to be able to go all the way through on it. So then we get into some really kind of the level of heinous crimes and race crimes and rape, and I want to really try to take a look at some of those topics, starting from the point of view of something that Jenny said, which is a kind of metaphysical stronghold from the tribe that she comes from, and the pretty close to the exact quote is, resentment is like taking a poison pill and waiting for the other person to die or get sick. So that's interesting, because a lot of times one argument for forgiveness is we're letting ourselves off the hook of holding on to some really toxic stuff, and aggression that we hold towards somebody else. So that's a kind of scientific view of what happens, and resentment being the opposite of forgiveness usually, right? If we resent somebody, we're not letting go, and we're certainly not forgiving them, or embracing them in any way, or wishing them well in any way. we're angry at them and we're holding that. And what Jenny's comment was, this is making the person who's holding that resentment, who's holding that lack of forgiveness, who's holding that lack of generosity of spirit, that it's making us, the people who are holding that, ill. And at the same time, since the content is ill wish towards others, it never even gets to them. Unless we become really spiteful and revenging, or avenging kind of people. So that's kind of one angle on it, the notion of who's actually being hurt by our unforgiving or resentful attitude if we're holding that. That's a kind of, you could say, almost Vulcan argument or logical argument for why to let go of it. It doesn't really have to do with the other person at a certain point anyhow, right? So that's one piece of logic. The question I asked, and kind of, I don't think I've quite got the answer from a dharmic point of view yet, is when we do forgive, there's also sometimes a feeling of like, all right, I forgive you, but really what I'm doing is ignoring what you did, or moving it into a space where it's not harmful to me. I've moved it out of my danger zone, out of my area in which it's harmful to me. And so therefore the karmic consequences of it are ignored, and of course the worst case of that is like, I thought of a situation where I worked with somebody and they actually turned out to be, complete total scam artist, the worst, a liar, a cheat, manipulator, acknowledged by everybody in the situation, but clever. And so by forgiving somebody like that, are you just giving them license to go on to the next situation, the next situation, the next situation? How deep is the forgiveness? How when do we have to be the agent of karma and sort of interrupt somebody else's kind of klesha festival that they're sort of sponsoring for the rest of the world? That's kind of a crystallizing issue that I really want everybody to sort of chew on, rather than come up with this. I'm not interested at this point in my life in coming up with glib answers, whether they're Buddhist or otherwise. We should have strong teeth called prajna. We should chew the material that we're offered and presented, and we should that's the only way to make it really personal and strong, don't you think? So then I thought of the, saying and again, I'm just going to put out some things onto the table and then open the conversation up. Jesus said, I believe, forgive them for they know not what they do, which is like, and then that triggered a contemplative blast on my part of like, okay, that means somebody's ignorant. Does that release them from responsibility for negative actions, as far as us being responsive to them, not responsible for them, but responsive to them? So I wrote down, is ignorance an excuse for bad behavior? Is forgiveness letting somebody off a hook that they maybe should be on for a while? Maybe we should hold them on the hook. Maybe we are the hook. And of course then, the reverse, when you flip the logic around, and I think for a lot of us, forgiving ourselves is really hard if you're really honest about it. The idea of when we commit some kind of foul or have a neurotic upheaval and kind of maybe yell at somebody or are just hard on ourselves all the way through, can we lighten up the reins and forgive ourselves for that? That's a super powerful topic, just turning it around, not thinking about others, but thinking about ourselves and the idea of forgiveness. Can we forgive ourselves? So that is a tremendously powerful aspect of this, is just relating to our own karma and our own patterns, and what role does forgiveness play in that? Are we letting ourselves off the hook? Do we need to process something? So in that regard, I wanted to talk about and this is a very strong area where the Buddhism has something very tangible to offer, which is purification practices, which, interestingly enough, are just not all that different from Christian tradition, from The 12th step, cleaning up your business is cleaning up your business, and it's not a matter of getting superior logic in place or metaphysics or whatever. This means taking an honest look at yourself. Some people would call it taking inventory, right? Take an honest look at where you've caused harm to others and even to yourself, where you've caused harm to yourself. And in the purification practices like the Vajrasattva practice and other practices like that, the first thing is taking the inventory and really contemplating our own actions and our own past, really. You have to. You can't just say it's now. No, the past doesn't have any imprint at all. We've done all kinds of things in the past that have had tremendous karmic impact on others, on our own future, on other people's present and future. So rather than just kind of blowing that all the way into a non-dual puff of smoke, which is kind of a nice trick if you can do it, but in the longer arc of the practice, we really take a deeper look at our being over time and understanding fully the notion of karma, which means going into time domain, looking at the past, looking at the present, looking at the future, looking at the impact of our actions on others, without trying to blow it up into some kind of non-existence. And that would be kind of a nihilistic approach, where we just say, well, it's just now, so we never had a past, and so therefore we never did anything. Which is basically what the Heart Sutra says, in a sense. So you could take this argument either way. If I was having a debate, I could have a debate with myself on this, which would be funny. Maybe one day I'll do that with a sock puppet, But the notion of, in the purification practice, first is taking inventory and acknowledging the, sometimes the language is translated differently, but kleshas or neurotic crimes, confused actions, aggressive, grabby, stupid. Throw out your own adjectives, distorted, confused types of thoughts and actions, and that we look at those from a kind of clean point of view, which is the point of view of primordial purity or fundamental purity, which is what Vajrasattva represents. So we we look at the possibility of basic goodness, or a kind of holistic approach towards ourselves, that we're fundamentally good and clean, just like we are after we take a shower. We're the same person, but now we've sort of washed some of that dirt and grit away, that kind of approach. And we look at our past and we sort of take inventory of it, take notice of it. And the second piece of that is then expressing remorse, or experiencing, more importantly, regret or remorse that we behaved badly that way, lost our temper, hurt somebody else, were careless with somebody else's feelings, were greedy and selfish in a situation in which generosity would have been much better medicine, were impatient when patience would have been better medicine. So we actually experience some kind of regret and taste the feeling of wanting to purify that. And then the third one is we may have made a mess, so like an example of the wrong way of using nowness as a sort of religion in Buddhism. And I'm going to say this, most of us have done this, and probably some of us think this is, the heart and essence of the whole thing, but and of course it is, but let's say you're sitting on the couch, you see, and it's a now, isn't it? It's beautiful. It's just this now moment. But you just left a sink full of dishes in the kitchen. And you're saying, it's now. I don't have to relate to that. That has no impact because I'm awake. I'm present right now. And then the dishes are piled up in the sink, and, it starts to breed ants and cockroaches, and, and the whole thing turns into a sort of a mess, So nowness is not a way of saying that our impact of our past actions is not rippling through into now and into the future even. So the third impact is to sort of clean up any mess that we may have made as we make our amends. That can include even apologizing to people that we've wronged, as a kind of part of that practice. And certainly if we've kind of, like, for example, we got angry and we threw something at our neighbor's window and broke their window, it means fixing their window. So it's not enough just to acknowledge that we acted badly and then acknowledge some kind of regret about that. We have to clean up the business too as much as we possibly can. And then the fourth piece of that purification practice is vowing not to return to that kind of activity, that action, that negative action. So we actually sort of buck up our intention to avoid that kind of, rage, or avoid that kind of grasping, or avoid that kind of stupidity or jealousy, or whatever it is that's caused the harm, whatever klesha has come up with caused the harm. So that's a place where, in a sense, karma and forgiveness are coming together in this kind of purification practice, because we're recognizing the ground of the situation as being potentially whole again. It's like sometimes we talk about basic goodness. We say like a piece of silver could be very clean by nature. We recognize its nature as silver, and then kleshas and neurosis is like tarnish on the silver, and we clean that up and restore it to its kind of fundamental quality of goodness. That analogy is used to express the idea that the fundamental ground is basically intact, whole, and good, and clean by nature. So that let's give an example there. Like, we have what's probably one of the most radical crimes we can commit in this life is murder. Killing another being, and particularly if there's strong aggression involved, not a question of self-defense but real rage and aggression. We've taken life. So this is one of the basic precepts in Buddhism, that we sort of allow acknowledgement of the fact that is, really, really not a good idea. And there's a debate over whether it extends even to taking one's own life, but let's leave that alone for the moment. That can be a much more complicated issue. So in the case of where we've committed murder, we have examples of people who've committed murder and it seems have really purified their karma and their action and their intention. And then it's interesting, in a case like that, where is the criminal? The criminal's kind of not there anymore. If somebody's really cleaned that up, the impact of the crime is still there. And maybe that's a case where you often see some level of forgiveness there, like from the family of the murdered person, because there's a purification and there's kind of deep clearing of that space. So we have to look over lifetimes and lifetimes and how complex our interactions are with other beings, and see that we've had so many different relationships just in this life in terms of how we've treated people, even in terms of how we treated the same person by loving them and then by being aggressive towards them. And all of us have a lot of experience about those kind of things. So then I thought, we look at some of the current examples, and I'm just going to sort of say a few topics, and then I want to really throw it open to us to discuss. And I'm not going to particularly try to answer these things, but we have a very big scene happening in the last couple of days where Michael Brown, was murdered by Officer Darren Wilson, and we're looking at that on the news, and everybody's commenting on it, and some people are taking one point of view and another point of view. And the question is, well, first of all, clarifying the karma of that, I think, is extremely important. And I think a lot of people on it want to believe what they want to believe, So it's interesting to see an investigative process happening, and they look carefully at all the comments, all the witnesses, all the evidence, because we rush to assume that which is comfortable in a situation like that for us to assume, whether we're on one side of the issue or another. However, taking the case of, you know, a young boy being killed in that violent way, no matter what the causality of it was, you know, how do we feel about the police guy who killed him? Is there forgiveness in our hearts for him? Is there only forgiveness if we feel that he was justified in doing what he did? Can we forgive him if we feel he was frightened and confused and is now sort of tailoring the truth to create his own safety net? Where does our forgiveness in that situation work? You know, is the absence of forgiveness helping the situation, or is it the absence of clarity that's causing a lot of the confusion? So this, as you guys know, is kind of my big topic. Is prajna is sort of driving for the hoop of clarity, even when it seems foggy. You try as hard as you can to see clearly, even in the face of a lot of emotionality and kind of impulse power. A couple of other situations. Bill Cosby's in the news. Wow, Mr. Jello has apparently, potentially, allegedly been drugging and raping women for the last 30 years. Innocent until proven guilty. That's our system. You can agree with it or not. And I think it's interesting to watch your mind take a leap. You know, you don't want to believe that about him, or now you're in a hurry to indict him. But still, what would that be like if that had been your sister or your girlfriend, you know, or somebody you were working with? Where does the kind of sympathetic or understanding confusion or kind of forgiving people because they know not what they do, as opposed to the clarity about working through so that they meet the karma, they meet their own destiny properly, and then have a chance to purify. So I guess the sort of slogan would be maybe premature forgiveness actually blocks the path of purification in some cases. Everybody's off the hook too early. The hook is a powerful place to be. And you know, it's just whether we're impaling ourselves with the hook or just hanging out from it for a while and sort of seeing more clearly how we got there, which is really a very compassionate approach towards being on the hook. Then I went, you know, further, like ISIS, you know, people getting beheaded and, you know, their heads left on the side of the road, and you know, this kind of, by modern standards, what we would, even if you filter it through the news media, if you filter it through the causality of it in terms of us, you know, having sort of incredible involvement with the causes and conditions of what's happening over there as a nation, and therefore as individuals, we're connected to that. We can't escape the causality, but where does forgiveness come in the face of tremendous aggression and barbarity? How far does it go? How far should it go? So kind of those are a few of the thoughts. I don't claim here to have solved this particular equation. There are other ones that are easier than this. I think this is a Maha equation. And I'd like to open the rest of the evening for discussion, commentary. If you're watching in the archives, I'll read the comments so you can stay in the flow of the activity. Please feel free to talk about a personal event in which these issues have come up for you. The issue is forgiveness and karma, and therefore the idea of purification, clarification. And if you want to participate, if you're not watching the archives but you're watching live right now, I'll remind you that there is if you go to facebook.com/David Nichtern, there's a link that Seth posted there, which, you know, says if you're watching live, just click and want to participate, just click on this link, and then you'll see the rest of what we're talking about here. It says to see all the comments and questions for this broadcast, click this link. So then you can just drop your comments in there. Let's see, I think some people have jumped in already, but I want to invite all of you now based on what we're talking about, try to stay on the topic if you can. It's helpful to everybody. Based on what we're talking about, what is your experience of working with forgiveness, with clarifying and purifying karmic obscurations of all kinds? Anything you want to sort of touch on further, we can go into. So Susan Roebuck is saying, I find it difficult to judge people's bad behavior without questioning my own actions of the past. It helps my understanding, which takes away the anger and leads to forgiveness. I then get stuck with the worry of who am I to judge, the feeling of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. As you say, when do we decide to intervene? So thank you, Susan. I think you're kind of resonating with the question that's being raised by this is absolutely who are we to judge, and then when are we the right person to sort of not make a judgment but discern something and activate and be an agent of karma. So let's look at that for a minute. Anybody has any thoughts and questions, you can, as you know, you can just comment, you can reply to Susan right there. You guys get your own threads going on if you like, it's fun. Multi-dimensional communication. It's like a built-in discussion group. Or, just post it for the rest of us to consider here. So please do write in your comments and questions now, and we can sort of go through them and have a look at the whole thing. David Smith is saying the mind training slogan, of course, Lojong, which is what David's referring to, or mind training, is one of the principal Mahayana practices and study. And we've looked at it. If you're not familiar with it, we've had a couple of talks in the past in the archives. You can look at it. So the mind training slogan, don't ponder others, keeps popping into my head. Yeah, it's those slogans bring us back over and over again to ourselves. So it's sort of like what Susan was saying, you come back over and over to yourselves. But does that absolve you of the responsibility, like you're in the playground, you're a mom, and you see another mother beating her child? This stuff happens, like really beating her child. Do you then don't ponder others? And do you go back and say, well, I've been angry at my own child, I know what that feels like? Or is there sort of an action required of us? So that's my exact kind of, point of investigation here tonight, is at what point do we need to connect and act, as opposed to just simply contemplating and driving it back towards our own sort of internal contemplation. But there's certainly a lot in that, and probably most of the situations that we've been in, many of them, we would do well to not ponder the faults of others, which is another way that slogan has been written. So Rebecca, hi Rebecca, is saying, forgiveness is a skillful means situation for me. One has to see if forgiveness is actually going to benefit someone. I struggle with this one as well as mercy. Oftentimes when forgiveness and mercy are not skillful, it can easily turn into idiot compassion and an enabling of the continuation of negative, harmful behavior. Well, that's sort of exactly the thing we're exploring. Sometimes not forgiving is actually the most compassionate thing to do in a situation, but one must see the situation with clarity. I believe Jesus meant not to take other people's bad behavior personally, but to look upon them with compassion because they suffer deeply from their confusion. I think it cuts through retaliation and perpetuating further aggression. That's my experience anyhow. Well, I think that's well said, Rebecca. That's sort of separating out the wheat from the chaff there. That we don't add aggression to a situation, even when we are acting directly in relation to confusion. We're not doing that from a ground of our own aggression. There's something else in what you said. Yeah, not taking people's bad behavior personally. the way this whole conversation really started was with family dynamics, which is hard not to take personally, you know. And Maria, my dear old friend Maria Muldaur, was saying, we were talking about a particular situation, and she said, look at the, you know, maybe somebody was not a good mother, for example, you know. Lots of people are not good mothers. They're too messed up, you know, and too caught up in their own anxiety, depression, anger, and so sometimes the children, which happens to be us, by the way, in a lot of these cases, have suffered and haven't been able to find solid ground for ourselves growing up. So it's not unusual these days with the analytic model to look back and say, well, it's the mother's fault. But what Maria was saying, if you look at the mother, this is somebody who was suffering themselves and had confusion and pain themselves. It's not like they're trying to be a bad person. It wasn't like, how can I figure out how to be a bad mother? It's and that's where I think the forgiveness is I think you're onto something there, Rebecca, is understanding that that suffering, the person's holding it already themselves. And from that ground, they're creating further pain for others. So it's a cycle and not perpetuating that cycle. So if anybody else has comments, questions, please pop them on. There's a link on facebook.com/David Nichtern where you can see all these comments and questions. Amy McNamara. Love the focus on self-forgiveness. Once heard an idea, likely from Sri Satchidananda, that the only person we can forgive is our own self, and that for others practice acceptance. Interesting. And quickly, so as to cease the poisonous ponder. Great. Okay. Cease the poisonous ponder. That could be a new slogan. That's a pretty good slogan. Or a song. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. Cease the poisonous ponder daily, fa la 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 la. It's a good one, Amy. Let's see. Okay, please everybody, now would be the time to write in your comments and questions so that we can sort of include them. I'm not presenting myself as an expert in this particular area. So if you would like to participate in this conversation on forgiveness and clarifying karma in various situations as maybe two poles of participating fully in interactive life with others, I'm looking for somebody to come up with some of the more powerful issues I talked about, like murder and rape and political and social injustice and things like that. Where how does what's happening right now in St. Louis area reflect on this? Okay, so sorry about that. That's my landline, which is actually nobody in the universe has that number, and I don't use that phone, but it's ringing anyhow, which means that some salesperson got a hold of it. Okay, so Lori is saying, I struggle with forgiving aggressive behavior from people in positions of power. Definitely have a tendency to more easily forgive and empathize with the underdog, abused and oppressed. Good one, Lori. Interesting point. I struggle with forgiving aggressive behavior from people in positions of power. Definitely have a tendency to more easily forgive and empathize with the underdog, abused and oppressed. So I think probably most of us would identify with that comment. And that's also where the karmic implications. I personally, Lori, it does seem true to me that when people, even in positions of power and tremendous greed and manipulation towards their own seeming well-being, short-term as it usually is, it seems clear, especially from the study of the six realms, in the book that I'm writing on that, The jealous God realm is sort of where that kind of energy is really manifesting in competition, power, you know, really trying to achieve the upper hand in any kind of situation. I even included in the book, I included like a little league dad, who's just completely pushing too hard, for the outcome for winning. It's where winning is everything in the jealous God realm. That realm is marked by tremendous confusion and aggression and pain. And you can see how tight people are and how unhappy and unhealthy in a certain very fundamental way within that, because there's no grace, there's no gracefulness, there's no generosity, there's no compassion. So I think that's really an interesting point, and maybe worth another couple of threads or comments from other people who want to join in on that thread. So let's take a couple of these threads and see if you all have more to say about it. Yeah, the Rebecca is saying, I have no problem intervening in a situation that I perceive to need action. Trungpa Rinpoche said that he would have no problem shooting someone dead if they were about to press a nuke button, for example. That's a sort of classic case of... you could also forgive them. I think this is what we're going to arrive at, is the simultaneity of forgiveness and skillful action and, sort of clarifying karma in situations. And part of that is not holding a grudge and not taking it personally, just doing what needs to be done. And I think I go back to Jenny's comment over and over again, that resentment and that kind of stored up rage is something that actually clearly, coming back to Spock, logically, clearly hurts the person who's holding it more than the person who is the object of it. I think that's really, really a kind of centerpiece kind of understanding, that when you get that idea, it can shift the way you're looking at these things. Okay, so I'm looking and inviting further discussion and comments. I hope that we're not, sometimes this technology is, we're right at the edge of it in terms of getting our comments in. So again, if you want to participate and you're watching live, please go to facebook.com/David Nichtern. You'll see the comments streaming there, or you can click on the link there to go through to all of them. But I'm, assuming that some of you I would have thought would have a lot to say about this topic. So I'm just hoping that everything's working the way it's supposed to, and that we're kind of getting your input here in a timely fashion. Seth, if you have any ideas for why we're not seeing more comments. I have a feeling people are writing in and we're not getting it. So if you have any ideas, send me a text, let me know. In particular, looking at some of the sort of heavier footprints of how much, I think the issue that was just raised by Lori about people in power who are really in a position to cause harm to the planet, to societies, to people, and also understanding our collusion with that. That seems the deepest karmic topic to me. Is like, it's always us and them, and ego's trick is to make us unaccountable and them doubly accountable. So taking any of these situations, for example, if you even just, I guess just being Jewish on my parents' side, as Katie often says, like what happened in Germany in World War II, the period before then, as far as understanding compassion and aggression and forgiveness, is a very, very deep topic. And I wonder, contemplating it right now as we're talking about it, you cannot actually ascribe all the responsibility to Hitler. It's like you're going, okay, this guy was the most evil dude, but everybody bought in and colluded. Otherwise, nothing happens. You just have some maniac in a park somewhere yelling at people on a soapbox. How does somebody get that kind of power to cause that much harm? Is through the power of collusion and collaboration. So it's a very deep topic, obviously, when you talk about the Holocaust and any of the other Holocausts, the Tibetan Holocaust, or there's issues all over the world and all over time where people have been completely decimated by another more powerful invader. Who is accountable if you are moving into the karma zone of it, and for forgiveness to have any kind of precision to it? Who are you forgiving? And I think if we look microscopically at our own behavior, as far as I'm concerned, you'll see shards of the worst behavior in the history of the planet within yourself. Maybe not fermented to the degree that we have in the great tyrants and so forth, but it's not like they're like a completely different species or something like that. So if we can find ways to gradually liberate ourselves from those shards of behavior as our primary focus, that seems to be the ripple effect that we're looking for. And in that regard, I just really have to tip my Buddhist cap to Thich Nhat Hanh. And the more I look at what he's saying, and what his life has been about, the more I'm feeling that this is somebody who is clearly like at the level of, obviously, major bodhisattva, maybe saint level. There's Monica read me an interview in the car on the way home last night with Oprah and Thich Nhat Hanh, and you just have to see that this is somebody who really was able to practice at the level of I don't want to say Jesus, because maybe that's too strong, and I also don't know, but like really having transcended ego in terms of modeling behavior that's not based on ego at all. So I'd like to, personally, I'm sending best wishes and prayer to him at this point, and also thankful and thankful for the teachings that are still going to linger after he's gone, and encouraging students who've been working with me to read Thich Nhat Hanh on various Dharma topics as being a very profound and kind of liquid, also in terms of the voicing of the teachings, very, very clear and very simple, very elegant. So, dear friends, I'm not sure, I cannot imagine you're not writing in right now. Okay, some more came in, okay. So, David Smith is saying, I think some deep psyche scrubbing needs to happen to truly forgive these more heinous crimes against humanity. Well, David, whose psyche are we scrubbing? Of course, would be an interesting question. So, if anybody has more comment on that, I'd like to see it. Ari Summerland is jumping in and saying, I live in a state, when you said that I thought you meant a state of mind, but you don't mean that, do you? Where the people in power really are abusing their power, okay? I don't think I can find forgiveness for their actions and words, though I truly believe they know not what they do. Yet I have no power to change their actions, even voting. A whole nother topic there, didn't help. How does forgiveness help in this situation? Continue to go inward and root these same reflections out in myself so the ripples of internal forgiveness venture out? Or get out there and protest on the streets? I'm too cynical and self-involved to do that, I think. Yeah, I think these are good questions. And there's a tendency sometimes with these kind of metaphysics, to get too introverted. I think that's a real danger of contemplative practice over the centuries, is that the people doing it get kind of quite isolated from the juicy part of society. I've been really, really thinking about this a lot lately, about how even deep meditation practice, even though it can liberate a tremendous amount of clarity and energy in an individual, if we pull back into a sort of niche and don't actively engage with the society that we're part of, I'm feeling this is sort of cocoon-like, and we need to look at even the deeper practices we're doing as coming back out and re-engaging the world that we live in and the time that we live in. So, yeah, Laurie is saying, and I think this is what we've maybe been looking for, and I think because Thich Nhat Hanh also spoke quite a bit about Christ and Buddha, and the link in terms of his way of looking at things. Thich Nhat Hanh's book on anger is a powerful lesson on forgiveness and compassion. So that's good. I'm just saying myself personally, I want to explore this topic much more of forgiveness. I don't feel completely up to speed on how it's possible to incorporate that as a deep practice and the view of it and what the practice would be. So thank you, Laurie, for mentioning that, and it's timely because we were just talking about Thich Nhat Hanh. So let's see what over the next couple of weeks, as we're reviewing this topic, what different people have said about it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. There's a quote, 436 quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh. Let's see what that says. Somebody posted that. Well, here, this would be a sort of the general kind of logic of it. When another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment, he needs help. That's the message he is sending. Wow. Well, that's the logic. If we're looking for kind of the right view, as we say, the view, the practice, and the result, that would be the right view. Easier said than done. In my opinion, a lot of other things that we practice are a lot easier than this. So we can check that out. That's the view right there, Thich Nhat Hanh. So maybe we have time for one or two other comments if they're there. Emma Windsor. Hi, Emma. Drive all blames into one seems to be a slogan that alludes to forgiveness. It alludes to it, but doesn't really come right out and say it. For me, it's not about being inactive or passive, nor taking the blame oneself. I don't know, Emma. I think it is about taking the blame oneself, but dropping blame from the equation altogether. Okay, that's an interesting take on it. Therefore, maybe forgiveness, as there is no blame to forgive. So that's kind of an emptiness take on it. And then Rebecca's saying, I tend to see it this way too. The slogan cuts to the game of hot potato where the potato is blame. Rebecca, you're starting to sound like somebody we know. So, yeah, that's a good one though, is I think drive all blames into one, and then kind of undercutting the whole notion of blaming being the ground of your reactivity to something. But does that also, I can't help it, this is just the way my mind works, does that mean sometimes something can't be somebody's fault? Like if I storm into my apartment and I've had a bad day and I start smashing things around. I was just reading in somebody's book where this guy got pissed off and he just started smashing things around his house. Or a friend was talking to me about their father and he came into the house and he just started smashing the dishes. maybe it's okay to say that's that person's fault. They should get new dishes. That's who should get the new dishes, you know. So I think this is a little bit of a conundrum, and what I felt is that sometimes it's too easy to come up with these kind of easy ways of talking about these things that sound kind of spiritually, and then when it comes down to really doing it, it's like, boy, this is challenging stuff. So I think we're reaching the end of our hour together. I know this is a juicier topic, and I know some of you have powerful things to say about it. So if we want to keep the thread going, please feel free to use this thread here to keep it going. And then I think it's time to tie a bow on it. There are, I think I lost count, but I noticed that I started doing this 3 years ago. Like so many organic things that just kind of happened and then became a thing. Like I love when we say in the Shambhala tradition, because it's kind of 30 years old. And in the tradition of the Tuesday night Dharma talks, gatherings, you know, that's about 3 years old. But as I mentioned, there's going to be a breather, and then we'll reconvene after the new year. I'll send out a note for the date. And also in January and February, I'm moving around the Northeast, and I have to mix this up with seeing people live, otherwise I go crazy just only seeing people virtually. I need to, like, sometimes, you know, give somebody a hug or see how their posture is in their sitting meditation. We were trying to work with somebody's posture today in Skype, and it was like not so easy to do online. So in January and February, I'll be, you know, in Cleveland and Wilmington and New York and up at Kripalu. So, you know, 4 good places for us all to get together live. And then probably right after the new year, at some point, we'll start doing these talks again. Because they've been, you know, juicy and fun, and I just assume, since a lot of you come back, that it's in some way helpful to you, and I'm hoping to be of service to create this kind of forum for Dharma to get talked about, and satsang. And if any of you are coming to Maui, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And I think for now that's it. We're also looking at doing some more in-depth workshops starting next year. We were going to do it this fall, but this fall was all travel for me all the time. So we'll probably do some more in-depth online workshops starting maybe in February. And sending a lot of love, best wishes. Most of you I know personally, and those I don't know. Hope you have a great holiday, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Hope you keep your head screwed on straight while you're trying to figure out who to buy gifts for, and who these people in your family really are, and who you really are. And everybody maybe can sort of use it as a time to reflect and do some deep practice. That's always a good idea. Then our conversations have a lot more meaning. So wishing you the best, and see you in 2015.